Hey guys, what's up? Welcome to my channel. Now I'm going to be doing some videos on the QAnon Q conspiracy theories that have been going around. Whether you think this Q guy is legit or not, man, is it a compelling story. It could be a Tom Clancy novel if somebody decided to put some characters and plot points into it. But today, I'm going to be doing a video here on Space Wars. That's the topic of my video. And I'm going to be doing a series of videos about mostly this QAnon conspiracy, but also some other conspiracies. This Q guy inspired me to make this channel. I'm going to be doing an introduction video and stuff, but I just want to, since this is my video, I want to do a real quick introduction and tell you what my story is and what my goal is. So I've been into conspiracy theories ever since I was a kid, always reading about the Illuminati and, all these different technologies, UFOs, aliens, Area 51, Roswell. I mean, going all the way up into the SR-71. I love military aircraft. I love space travel, space flight, and I'm a total aeronautical nerd and geek. So that's one thing I want you to come when you come to my channel. I'm going to be focusing on what's physically possible, what is, realistic within known technology and known scientific fact, because I hate to say it, but a lot of the conspiracy area is dominated by people who aren't educated in like what actual science is, and specifically physics. A lot of uh, like, if you're a flat earther, you're gonna hate me, but please subscribe if you're a flat earther, because I'm gonna be doing some flat earth videos, and I'm gonna come at it from a little bit different angle than I don't think you've seen before. Uh, but that's just one of the examples that I want to give. Like, I mean, anyway, so my goal is to come at these theories with what is realistic, what is not. Let's try to sort the information from the disinformation, because if you remember Q, disinformation is important, and I think it's important because you need to have some air of, non-credibility, so that the mainstream media doesn't totally destroy this thing like we saw with Pizzagate, where the mainstream media just, everybody who's associated with it fired, reporting on it fired, everybody who brought it up, oh, we're gonna pin you as a crazy. And anyway, so let me get straight into it. Maybe you have heard these booms. If you Google sonic boom heard, I mean, maybe you've seen these reported in your local news. These sonic booms have been heard all across the country. All sorts of people have been reporting these booms heard. They're in some cases their windows shaking, their houses rattling. But I'm going to posit a theory that these sonic booms are covert CIA satellites being deorbited by the good guys, military intelligence, the Marines, the Air Force, the good guys, the NSA, and the CIA. We know the CIA is rogue. We know they've been rogue since '63 when they assassinated JFK. We know this. We know because of the documents Trump released, there was more than one shooter. It's basically a fact now. It's just nobody's reporting on it. The mainstream media is not reporting on it, but we all know. We knew this before the documents were released, and now we know it even more. So the CIA has been a rogue agency, and they have rogue satellites. The logic follows that they would have rogue satellites because let's remember, there's billions and billions, maybe trillions of dollars that are missing from the Pentagon's budget in black projects. And then even this stuff on the books, a $10,000 hammer, $30,000 toilet seat. We know that this stuff is fake, and the government knows that this stuff is fake. And some of this, it needs to be fake. You need to have Area 51 working on the next greatest military technology, and they say it's a toilet seat, and we say okay, and we pay them the money so that they can keep this stuff under wraps, because it's important. So let me try to run through this stuff. I'm already 5 minutes in. I haven't even got to the information. Let's try to go. I'm going to pound through this. Try to stay along with me. There's a lot of info that's going to come at you, and I'm going to try to stay focused based on Q posts. All right, so these sonic booms, we've heard about them. They're all across the country. Okay, if you search the Bama boom, you'll find more stuff about these. The Bama boom was heard over Alabama, and maybe there was multiple booms. That was one of the reports where there was windows shaking, windows rattling. Um, but basically, I think that these are CIA rogue satellites being deorbited by the good guys. So let's go back in time. Let's go back to 1979. Skylab was deorbited unintentionally. This was a giant satellite, or I'm sorry, a giant space station that humans could dock with. You see here, this is the Apollo uh, capsule, and what is this? The service module, and this is docked here with Skylab. So that gives you a scale. Remember the Saturn V rocket that carried the Apollo capsule to the moon and back, and also to orbit, and also they did a mission to Venus. That was the largest mission, the largest the largest space vehicle ever. Basically, until past and present, up until Elon Musk gets his BFR off the ground, the Saturn V is King Daddy, and Skylab was carried up by a Saturn V, and in multiple pieces. Um, but inside here, you see there's room for people to sleep. There's room for people to eat, commune. There's room for scientific scientific studies to be carried out. It's solar powered. You can see the solar panels. They have two horizontal discs here, and then like a helicopter disc up here. This was launched way back in the 70s, so this is all this technology is basically the same stuff we got. So keep that in mind, because you think that this stuff would have, because remember the Apollo mission was launched on a thing that's basically like worse than your TI-83 calculator that you use in high school for algebra. And right now we've got smartphones in our pockets that are like millions of times more powerful than that. These photovoltaic cells, they are more efficient nowadays, but not a huge amount. This thing has, hydrogen oxygen tanks. It has fuel cells, hydrogen fuel cells. It has, basically a lot of stuff that we have modern day. But anyway, let me go. This is also a huge space vehicle, huge artificial moon or artificial satellite that man has put into orbit. Again, flat earthers, please stay with me. I know you're going to be just shaking your head, but I swear that this stuff's really cool, and if you get into it, it's true, because there's no way that you can fake all these little minute details. Let's keep going. So these are some pictures from Skylab. This was 170,000 pounds. That is approximately 3 or 4 times larger than the largest satellite on record to be put into space. Multiple times larger than the space shuttle, multiple times larger than the Hubble Space Telescope. Just a huge space station. But it came to an end because it started losing altitude in orbit, and it started falling into the atmosphere. And it started to break up and crash into the atmosphere. Oh my god, I'm already 10 minutes in. Alright, I'm gonna keep trying to rush through this. So anyway, this thing was uncontrollable and was lost, and it was abandoned, and then it was left to have a decaying orbit, where its orbit was just going to keep slowing down. It was going to keep falling into the Earth's atmosphere, which would slow it down further, and then it would just run away until it eventually burnt up in the atmosphere. They couldn't control it. They didn't have anything to do, so they just tracked it, and they eventually found that it was going to come in over Australia. So here's the path. It came from the southwest all the way across to the northeast of the Australian continent. And this was cool because they knew, NASA and other space agencies knew ahead of time where this thing was coming in, because all these things are calculable. Even if they're out of control, you can calculate where it's going to come in. So they told the population, duck and cover, basically, run for safety. They didn't know what was going to happen because this is a huge 170,000 pound space object. They didn't. It was out of control. They couldn't burn it up over the ocean. It was coming in, and they were worried about people being hurt on the ground and property being damaged. So I'm gonna try to find some good excerpts from this article to read to you. Sorry. Okay. So here's Bill Peters, who is in charge of the program to prolong the life of Skylab. We thought if we could stop it tumbling and lower the drag, it would stay in orbit longer. We went out to the Bermuda tracking station in March 1978 as it was the only place that still had the old Skylab ground equipment. There was a guy at Patrick Air Force Base looking at it visually, and he could tell when the solar panels were facing the sun. He would call out on the phone line, "It's dark. Okay, now the wings are facing the sun." And I said the command to turn it on, and the RF downlink came on immediately. RF is radio frequency, or radio. But as soon as the solar panels looked away from the sun, it shut down. We only had the solar cells working, no batteries. Having found we could actually get the thing to power up, we came back to the control center at Houston, and in less than 30 days we designed and built new computers and software and started operations. First of all, we had to charge the batteries. The batteries were turned off as they had special circuits that stopped you using the batteries if the voltage dropped below a certain level. Each time we tried to turn the batteries on, we could get a few milliamps of current into the batteries before the circuitry turned it off again. So we just kept sending on commands. We sent thousands and thousands of on commands through the tracking station at Bermuda and Madrid, which came online later. Okay, so let me just interject. If you don't know about batteries, especially the batteries back in the 70s, these are probably lead acid batteries or some other kind of rudimentary technology, but space is cold, and these batteries would have gotten really cold if they hadn't been used. So what they're doing is they're blipping, keep telling it to turn on, and every little bit, it's pulling some energy out of the battery, and every little bit of voltage of milliamp current is pulled out of that battery, it warms up a little bit. So if you send thousands and thousands of this, it warms up a few degrees. And if you look at a battery voltage versus temperature chart graph, just Google that, you'll see that as the temperature increases to a point, the voltage also increases. So that's why in the winter, when it's really cold, your car has a hard time starting because the battery's voltage is low. But if you keep cranking it and your batteries can overcome that initial cold part and then starts warming up, then boom, your car will start up. And then throughout the day, no matter how cold it is outside, your battery's been warmed up, so every time it'll start up real fast after that. So let me continue. We spent April, May charging batteries until eventually we got them all up to the right voltage. So they're turning the batteries on, and then they need to hook the solar panels into them, and they're on separate circuits in case there's a malfunction. So they're getting the batteries up to temperature with their commands, and then they're pumping the solar panel voltage into them. I remember sitting there looking at the strip pen recorder, which gave a bleep when the sun sensor came on. At that moment, I sent the command. I think it was through Madrid, to hold altitude. We didn't stop tumbling until about June, when we could enable the gyros to hold the lab in that altitude. So they're basically, one guy on the ground is looking through this thing. This Patrick was looking visually through a telescope, and he can see when it's facing the sun. And he's saying when the thing's saying the right when it's facing the sun, then this guy types in the command to to hold altitude, or to stop the tumbling, so that the solar panels can put maximum voltage into the battery. So this is what kind of basically the technology they're working at is. This is like an old remote control toy or something, where this guy's typing commands in one side and then hitting enter, and it's beaming that command up to the space station, and then another guy's like watching it with his eyes through a telescope and then telling this other guy over the phone, hey, it's about to turn on now. So this is kind of a perilous situation. Okay, so alright, so let me next we're going to listen to some eyewitness testimony. Now listen to this stuff try to paint the picture in your mind of what these witnesses are telling you.
Oh, my name is Truce Graham, and yes, I was just telling the lady here about the tremendous noise that we heard the night that the Skylab landed. I didn't see any of the debris coming down, but I heard this enormous sound, and I'll never forget it, and it was like it was a supersonic boom, like everyone calls it, but it was like thunder, only magnified. And the fact that we knew that it wasn't a real natural event, it sort of made it all the more frightening. It was almost like the end of the world had come, only we knew that it was caused by this supersonic boom. But then they hadn't prepared us for this sound, so we just sort of said, my God, this is the end of the world. That's what I thought at the time. And in fact, some people actually hid under the bed where I was staying. They were so frightened, and the dog and everybody was under there, but I was outside hoping to catch a sight of something falling, but I didn't. I just heard this tremendous sound, which I'll never forget in my life.
Wow, so the end of the world, it sounded like the end of the world. They prepared her for sonic booms, but this was just incredibly loud. And if she referenced thunder there, and if you think of thunder, it's not just the initial crack, that really loud crack, but then also the echoing, the reverberation off, especially if you live near mountains or hills, that reverberation, just amazing. So this Skylab, let's remember the Skylab, 180,000 pounds. So this is 3 to 4,000 times, or I'm sorry, 3 to 4 times larger than the largest satellites. So there's some more here. It's another really good eyewitness testimony.
The countdown on the Skylab splashdown continues.
Several bright lights, approximately 5 or 6, some brighter than others, quite intense, had an orangey colour about them.
We were woken up at about 12:40 with 6 loud sonic booms which rattled the windows and the wardrobe doors.
This very well-lit object coming straight towards us with shooting stars in front of it.
Wow, so shooting stars in front of it, just loud, bright light, bright objects, and shooting stars. So what that sounds like to me is it's coming straight at you. So if you remember that back to that Simpsons episode with the asteroid or the meteor, there was it was coming straight at you, so your perspective is looking at it dead on, and there was just like a large plume in front of it. And just think about big chunks of this spaceship, solar panels, compartments, modules, because let's remember these these space stations are just aluminum, carbon fiber, Kevlar, some steel, probably titanium, maybe magnesium, wiring, computer consoles, storage things, oxygen tanks, all sorts of just different things that are going to react differently to coming in the atmosphere. So here's one more really good eyewitness testimony.
They were squashed. It's fantastic. Just inside, of course, raised the children from their beds and went and stood facing Wallace Hill.
So they told you to stay in and you immediately got up and went out to look.
Always a sticky beak, and knowing we'd probably never see something like that again.
So let me just interject, that's exactly what I would do. The authorities tell me not to go look. First thing I'd do is go outside and take a look.
And yes, first thing we noticed was a glow above the clouds that were just on top of Wallace Hill at the time. And the trees started swishing around, the wind swirling around, and this peculiar smell, like acrid smell. And then this, I can only describe it, it looked a bit like a multi-storey building on its side, with very well lit up, came sort of towards us just like something out of Star Wars. And huge chunks of metal were flying off, mostly towards the east, obviously towards the sea. And yes, it went completely over the top of the house, and just as we went back inside, the terrific sonic boom was probably the most memorable thing for most people. Even those who didn't see it would have heard it. Yeah, so it was certainly something we'll never forget.
Wow. Could you imagine being there to see that? This woman must have had amazing eyesight back then. She's talking about this huge object coming in looking like a skyscraper. And can you listen to that? The the air was starting to swirl, so this was affecting the local weather and also the smell. That's the first time I've ever heard of a smell associated with anything like this. So this woman was definitely had all her senses tuned in, and she was paying attention. So I think her testimony is really good. The sonic boom that she was talking about, the debris, the glow over the horizon, the glow. Let's keep remembering that. So these are eyewitness testimony. This is back in July 1979. This is a documented event. I'm going to put all the links to this into the description of this video. So please take a look, because this stuff's really fascinating. And hopefully flat earthers are still with me. So I'm going to start getting into the good stuff. Alright, so the US spy satellite is the largest satellite in the world. So this is a satellite sent up, an Air Force satellite launched on a Delta IV heavy rocket. The Delta IV is one of the largest space vehicles, the largest heavy lift space vehicles that exists. I think SpaceX has something comparable now, their latest Falcon. But this is a tried and true space vehicle. And this satellite is, it's classified of course, but its weight is estimated between 30,000 and 60,000 pounds on the high end. But yeah, definitely 40,000 pounds. So if you remember Skylab, that's 170, 180,000 pounds. That one on the Saturn V, the largest space vehicle ever created. And it took them 1 or 2 tries to get that thing up there. Just in pieces, not... Saturn V is most reliable, never had a crash, never had explosion, never had an issue. So if we think about 40 to 60,000 pounds, this Spacelab was, 4 to 5 times larger than that, which means it would have burnt up with more vigor, more excitement, louder booms. So those testimonies that we listen to are very vivid, very detailed. Sounded like the end of the world. These, thunder, the reverberation. So let's get into the modern day. So if
New
you
Mexico,
looked
there it
on,
goes right there.
Okay, so watch this guy's
Big,
video.
bright fireball. New Mexico, there it goes right there.
So this guy has a really good breakdown. He's combined both the booms and these meteor. So let's just look at this.
All was witnessed clear down in Tucson, up in parts of New Mexico. There it goes right there. Big, bright fireball. That was picked up on the Phoenix webcam that looks over the city.
Yeah, so these meteors have been caught on cameras all over. Let's look at some more. This is in British Columbia, Canada. Wow. You see the whole sky, the whole horizon lighting up. I'll put all these links down in the video description. There's all sorts of them. This is in China. There's a bunch of these in China. Watch this.
You got that? Oh my gosh, that's so cool.
This is amazing. This is like a bunch of debris. So this is more than just one object. This is like a large scattering of objects. Isn't that cool? These are not UFOs. These are not spaceships. These are something heavy and dense burning up in the atmosphere. Here's some more. You can see the tails. These are almost like comets, but you can see that one just disappeared. It burnt out. This one just burnt out. So they're disappearing. They're
is
burning
that?
out in the atmosphere.
Yeah. Why does it have little particles around it? That's a plane.
Are you sure?
This guy's calling
It's
it a plane, but
gotta be. I
it's
see
not.
little
You can see
flashing
the
lights
trail.
like wings,
And
right?
let's remember, the eyewitnesses, if their eyes aren't 20/20, the camera is going to see
fuck
better
is
than
that?
them. So
No,
there's a
there's
lot of
multiples.
eyewitnesses that
Okay,
say,
that's a
"Oh, look, it's
cluster.
moving this way, it's that way. It's oh, look how crazy it's moving. Oh, it's going so fast, or it's a plane, or it's flashing."
What the fuck that is.
But then the video shows something like this, which is a steady state object, and you know, eyewitnesses, if they can be fallible. So here's another one, that same one from Phoenix. There it goes, boom. So let's look at the stages. So first it comes in, and there's some of them do this and some don't. But first it comes in, gets brighter, brighter, and then there's a flash. So brighter, brighter, and then right here it's gonna flash. Boom, and then it disappears. So that flash is the last little bit of the densest part of that, whatever it is, burning up, and then it disappears. It's gone. It's all been burnt up in the atmosphere. All right, so here's Finland. There's that flash. Boom, and then it goes over the horizon, and the whole horizon's lit up like that Australian Skylab report. Let's watch that again. So it comes in, it gets brighter and brighter, and then this one looks like it flashes behind the horizon, but we see the whole horizon, whole sky light up, and then it dissipates. Alright, here's another one over UK. That's a very short video. And here's another one over Canary Wharf, London. So this didn't catch the whole thing. So very cool, very peculiar. So none of those videos had sonic booms, but I'm trying to correlate. I'm going to do a spreadsheet. I'm going to try to correlate the sonic booms with those meteor sightings. So anyway, let's continue. X-37. This is the secret Air Force space plane. Not so secret. If you look at this, it's inside of a missile or a rocket dome, and there's be two of these, so the other one would clamshell over the top of this. But this is like a mini space shuttle. So you look at these little wings, they look kind of like a space shuttle wing. It's got the payload bay, like the classic space shuttle payload bay. You know, the motors down here, and this is where it connects to the main rocket fuselage. These are some fins for aerodynamic guidance. The wings and the fins are for landing back on Earth. Those are for atmospheric guidance. And you can see this is all heat shielding in here, and probably vibration dampening as well. And then this clamshell is what launches it. So this is what it looks like. It's not very tall. It's only 7.5 feet tall with its landing gear. So this is not nearly as large as a space shuttle. Space shuttle could carry the Hubble telescope, and this could not. This is a lot smaller. This, if we want to talk about human capacity, you could fit 4, maybe 6 humans in here with all their suits. These are not space suits, but it's about as bulky as a space suit would be. So if they're sitting in here, kind of cramped, they can make that work. 4 to 6 of them with all the gear. And some of the things, some of the missions that this has been talked about doing, it's the Air Force. It's been talked about capturing enemy satellites. It's been talking about putting space marines, you know, space troops into space to shoot down other troops or satellites or conduct space wars. Put sensitive military satellites in orbit. Release other weapons against space, you know, space-based weapons. Do all sorts of espionage. Could have all sorts of sensors in here that would listen to other enemy satellites. So this thing could have a wide range of missions. But what I think it's doing is taking out CIA covert satellites. So if we look back, September 6th launches the X-37B on a SpaceX SpaceX rocket. And if we here's a for a good sense of scale, this is the space shuttle. This is a rendering space shuttle, you know, the classic space shuttle with the X-37 inside of it to give you a impression of its size. But anyway, so this is the X-37B was launched on a SpaceX missile or a SpaceX rocket, and if you remember, Q was talking about SpaceX, right? Q was talking about how SpaceX was involved with the CIA in North Korea. If you look at that RISV asset management guy, that is basically a laundering front to turn CIA money clean and then funnel the CIA money into the North Korea and SpaceX, and there's all sorts of other things that that RISV guy. But if you see RISV, that's CIA, so remember that. So anyway, so also SpaceX is involved in this. There's some theories that Elon Musk was compromised by the Illuminati, or he was working for them unknowingly, and then maybe the alliance of the Trump and the military intelligence have turned him back. So there's X-37. They say there's only one of them, but I bet there's a whole fleet of these. There's at least 3 or 4, maybe more, definitely, because this spacecraft also spent the record for reusable spacecraft flight or something for like over 700 days in orbit, and that was probably just one of them. They probably have multiples of these. If you're the Air Force, you're gonna have multiples of these. All right, so let me just try to keep going through this. So they've been launching these things all through in time. They're really cool. So let me just say that what I think they're doing is using these to take out enemy or rogue CIA satellites, because the CIA is using satellites because if you have a satellite, then you can subvert the internet. You can bypass the internet, and that is a huge thing if you're trying to bypass the NSA, because if you remember, the NSA is compromised, but it also has the white hats. The NSA is the guys who are saving this information on the cabal and basically capturing the evidence. And let's remember this Utah data center that they built. This was like 10 years ago. They were building this thing, and they built it to download the entire internet. If you read through this thing, this data center is designed to download the entire internet, store it for an indeterminate amount of time. At the first, they estimated, there's some estimates where they could store like a 3-day rolling cache of the internet, so they would have like the past 3 days of everything, and then they could go through that, with their agents, and they could go and pick and choose all the important things they need to keep from that and save those permanently. And then they'd have this rolling thing, like on the radio show, they have like a 7-second window where they can really quick bleep out the guy who's cussing or saying stuff crazy before it goes live. They have that 7 seconds where the engineer can react really quickly. Well, that would be the same thing, except the NSA would have 3 days. Well, now that was at the beginning. Now that's probably like years. They probably have like 3 years, or maybe they have 5 years or 10 years, because we know that computers are just expanding, booming, and then all you have to do is just buy more hard drives and you can capture more data. And the NSA data center has been capturing every single byte of data traveling across the internet, and like legally they're only allowed to capture it if it comes from out of the country, but Google, Amazon, Yahoo, all these people, they route this stuff all across the whole world. So you send an email, that email might come from you here in the United States, but it might bounce off a server in London or in France or in Japan, and then it comes back and goes to California or wherever you're sending it. Well, it's been outside the country. Now the NSA can scoop that up and keep it forever. So anyway, the NSA has all of the information. So if the CIA wants to get around the NSA and the internet, then they would have to have a constellation of satellites where they could have a private satellite network where their CIA agents could beam information back and forth on these private satellites. And that's totally, completely possible. You could definitely have a private CIA constellation. Also, the CIA is going to have everything else that any other U.S. military satellite has. So it's going to have optical satellites that have really good cameras to monitor things physically. It's going to have different wavelength optical cameras, infrared, gamma, X-ray, all these other wavelengths, so that they can do everything. Like these satellites can spot missile flares, infrared missile flares. They can spot heat signatures or radio waves. They can see all sorts of stuff. So the CIA is going to have everything that anybody else can have. Because remember, the CIA is rogue, and the CIA is like the center of the corruption in the U.S. government, and then the FBI, the NSA, the executive, all these other branches are also compromised. So the CIA has access to all these guys, and anything that anybody else can have, they're going to have. So they're going to have all these espionage. They're going to have their own drones. The CIA has their own access to their own drones. So they're going to probably have their own satellites to control those drones. Maybe like that drone that crashed in Iran, maybe that was instead of being hacked by the Iranians, or like the Iranians say, or like the Air Force says, it just went out of control and lost an engine and crash landed. Maybe the CIA actually like spoofed that thing and took it over. So anyway, all these sonic booms, all these meteors, all of the stuff, it really sounds like the Skylab crashing. And these military satellites are the largest satellites launched in the world, and they're all secret, and they're on the largest rockets ever launched in the world. So they would leave a boom. They definitely would leave a boom. There's that's definitely true that a satellite burning up in the atmosphere would leave a boom, and it also would leave burn a hole in the sky like these videos would do. So that's my theory. That's my space war theory, that all these sonic booms that are going on, the Bam boom and all the other booms, are not aliens like this guy thinks. They're not jets, right? They're not supersonic aircraft. They're actually satellites being deorbited by the X-37 secret space plane. And there's all sorts of ways. There's cool ways. They could have a little robotic arm, and then this X-37 has its own engines, so it can thrust its way next to a satellite, and they could grab it with its arm, and then it could thrust and give a little tug and throw that thing out of its orbit. There's another thing with this X-37 could have like a spray can, like a spray paint can, except instead of spray paint, it's like a dense rubber, like a metallic rubber compound that could spray out, and then the satellite, as it's coming around at these hundreds of miles an hour, thousands of miles per second, it's coming around, it would, that stuff would stick to it, and it would increase its mass and also slow it down, and that would tug it down into the atmosphere. This thing could have a gun on it, and it could just shoot the satellite down. There's all sorts of stuff that this X-37 could carry. Just a normal machine gun would be enough to take out these satellites, because these orbits are very fragile up there, and they're very fragile and need to be maintained. And if you can just, a normal AR-15, put a couple holes in the thing, you're going to put holes to the circuit boards, it's not going to be able to maintain altitude, it's not going to do these corrections, and it'll just burn up. And that's why they're all over the place. If we notice, they're all over, populous areas in the northern latitudes. Where's that? The U.S., the CIA spying on America. They're not supposed to be, but they're doing it. So that's basically my theory, that the CIA has rogue satellites, and the good guys are taking them out with the X-37 spy plane. And it just launched. Remember, it just launched in September. It's up there. There's probably more than one of them. It would be useless without more than one of them, in my opinion. And these windows where they're going to have an intercept, because it's really hard to change your orbit, so they're going to have to really precisely time these things. They're going to have to plan them, weeks, months out in advance to kind of get this thing so that the X-37 can pass multiple objects and complete these different missions. And we're still hearing them. There's still booms. If you Google it now, there's still booms. This is from 11 hours ago. This one's from yesterday. These booms are still being heard. These Meteor videos are still being seen. This is from November. There was a lot of them in November, and that's when there was a lot of Q posts too. So let me leave you with a couple cool videos. So Call of Duty, the video game. All right, I hear you guys laughing. Just watch. It has some cool stuff. It's like a cool movie.
Odin Control, the orbital weapon's got a successful test fire ping.
Roger, Mosley. Tracking weapon dry fire signal.
Hey Baker, here's our ride. Let's head in.
Payload, this is Odin Control. Ready to receive.
Odin Control, we're heading back to debrief the new crew.
Roger. We're prepping airlock C. Shuttle is in final docking sequence. Payload, 10 meters. Begin rotate.
Alright, so the premise of this video game, this is like similar to the X-37, and this is what these Space Marines came up into orbit on. So this would be a manned option versus unmanned, where there would be a team of Space Marines. And we see they have their, what are they called, ESA, their packs with their jets so they can control their little movements around in orbit. This is like a space station here, like some kind of military or Skylab or International Space Station type thing. And then we can see over, if it pans up again, this is the Odin. This is a space weapon. This is like a rods from God or some kind of energy weapon that is fictionalized in Call of Duty. And basically this is some kind of rogue weapon that the bad guy takes over and he uses to attack America. And these guys are the good guys, and they're coming to destroy this Odin. So this is American flag on it. These guys are American flag, but this is a rogue satellite. So I mean, Call of Duty has some really pertinent themes going through it. If you guys haven't noticed, they had their whole Vietnam Black Ops one was all about MK Ultra, so that's pretty cool. All this stuff's on YouTube if you don't want to buy the game. I'm gonna put all these videos. Thanks to all these guys for creating these videos. So anyway, we saw the X-37 type of spacecraft, space station, space weapon. Let's skip ahead. These are the Marines going to deorbit the rogue satellite.
But remote RCS systems are not
leave you guys with this. Please subscribe, thumbs up, leave a comment. Do you think I'm crazy? Do you think this is realistic? Because I think all this is realistic so far. None of it is physically impossible. None of it is, you know, economically possible either. So let me leave you with the Space Marines destroying the rogue space weapons. And let's pay attention to the visuals here about how this spacecraft breaks up in the atmosphere and tumbles to its ultimate demise.
Ignite those RCS fuel lines!
You heard him, Baker! Fire! I got you, Baker! Just keep shooting!
15 degrees. 23 degrees. That's it. That's enough to drop it into the atmosphere. Specialist Mosley. Kira. We have LOS with the crew of Odin Control.
Let me just pause it. You can see the streaks of flame coming off of her arms. You can see the bending of all the solar panels and the debris being broken off, because this is now a spacecraft just starting to descend into the atmosphere, the very upper levels of the atmosphere. So we're not even into the dense part of the atmosphere yet.
Repeat, loss of signal with Odin Control.
Alright everybody, if you've made it this far into the video, thank you for watching. I'm going to leave you with this last picture of the X-37. You can see up here there's no windscreen, there's no cockpit. This aircraft or spacecraft is completely autonomous or unmanned if it needs to be. Like I said earlier, I think it could carry 4 to 6 troops fully armed, weapons and their spacesuits and any payload they needed. Or it could carry some sort of weapon, energy weapon, physical machine gun. It could carry a grappling hook or arm or a spray can or any sorts of cool weapon you could think of, any sorts of cool space weapon you could think of. And like I said, it also set the world record for the longest reusable spacecraft in orbit for over 700 days. But also I think there's multiples of these, you know, 3 or 4 at the minimum and maybe upwards of 10 on the high end. And I think they're deorbiting CIA satellites. If you think that I'm right, Leave a comment if you think I'm wrong. Leave a comment. Please share the video if you think it's awesome. Please share the video if you think I'm full of crap. And as always, keep following Q. I'm going to have some more videos. Those flat earthers, are you flat earthers still with me? I'm going to have some videos just for you. Also, EMPs coming up next video. Thanks for watching. Bye.